Folks, before you submit your final products on the case study this week, I wanted to just kind of reflect on this a bit and just offer some words of wisdom here in week 8. There is no new analysis that needs to be done. Well, yeah, that's true. No more Excel analysis, I guess I should say. There's no more there's no more Excel work unless there are things that you want to get cleaned up. And please feel free to do that. So what this is kind of a summary of what is in the topic 8 discussion for the case study. And I just want to remind you what the final product ought to look like. I'm not going to regurgitate this, but here it is. Remember, it should be about 1,000 words, right? So you got plenty of time or you got plenty of capacity here to, as it says, maybe look at some references, kind of get some idea about the real estate market. I'm not looking for a 500-word report on the real estate market, but just some background that will help you kind of frame your paper as you go through and put it together with all the work that you've done in Excel. Just kind of going from, let me start from the back here. Don't forget, this needs to be submitted through Lopes Wright. There is a rubric for this. Make sure you take a look at the rubric. A lot of it aligns with the stuff I will talk with you here about in a second. But take a look at that rubric and make sure you're using the APA standard for submitting this. But the body of the paper should have these 4 headings. An introduction. You all have written many papers in your lifetime based on some of the things that you take out of this quick study and a little bit about the North Valley real estate case study. By the way, in the class resources area, I don't know if you saw them, but there's 3 attachments in there, and one of them does give just a tiny bit of background on the the North Valley situation, just enough to kind of get an introduction done. The analysis is going to be everything that you have done the last 2 weeks to generate Excel results. So you've analyzed a lot of data. How you want to put that together? Really, a lot of it is already graphical. Maybe there's some charts that you want to build, but just make sure that it looks nice. Make sure it's legible. Make sure it's spaced correctly and it's something that's readable, and that'll be fine for me. Obviously, the big piece of this here is the interpretation, and I'll save a little bit of that for. I've got a couple more slides here to go back through topic 6 and topic 7. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then here in the conclusion, based on all the analysis and interpretation you did, what sort of advice would you provide for the North Valley real estate folks based on the data that you looked at? And I know that there are really no specific questions. So that leaves this sort of open-ended, but it'll be just good, hard analysis that will I say analysis and interpretation that will sort of lead to that, and you can sort of frame that the way you want, obviously with some justification from your results, and then anything that kind of goes with the GCU Christian worldview. Obviously, we want to include that as well. So that is, again, that's just kind of a little bit about what I'm expecting to see in the final product. And again, anything from week 6 or week 7 that you did not do well in Excel or that you made adjustments to, by all means, just make sure that you do that, include it in the final product. And when I see that, if it's updated and it's updated correctly, I will go back and I will adjust the grades from week 6 and 7. I know that there was some challenges with Excel, and I certainly expected to see that, based on the fact that there's a lot of new things, a lot of new tricks going on here with Excel. Just a reminder about what happened in week 6. This was mean, median, range, standard deviation. So measures of central tendency and measures of variation or measure of dispersion, however you want to look at that. So this first piece of the analysis that you did, notice that I kind of put a line here between this part of week 6 and this part of week 6. This was kind of the one variable analysis, and really what you were looking at was the price and all the data. I think that was the selling price of all these homes that you were taking a look at. Let me just say this. I know we asked questions in a specific area, but if I were going to respond to this and write this paper that you all have to write, I would probably start down here first and then go backwards. Meaning, if somebody gives me a set of data, the first thing I am not going to do is start computing a bunch of values. The first thing I'm going to do is I want to look at the data visually, and you did that through a box and whisker plot, 5-number summary box plot, whatever you want to call that. There's various names for that. Or you could, certainly you could do this by looking at a histogram. But the first thing I would do, maybe before I talk to anything about numerical data, I would talk about what the data looks like visually. And certainly there was certainly something that you should have detected there in terms of skewness. I won't say any more, but that would probably be the way that I would go. The next thing, obviously, then you had an opportunity to actually compute summary statistics, 5-number summary, all that sort of stuff. And I think the two big takeaways here, and I kind of highlighted it here, is which MOCT is measure of central tendency. We're talking mean, median, mode. Which measure of central tendency and which measure of dispersion are most appropriate, given that your data is probably showing some skewness and with potentially some outliers that you may have been able to detect through the box and whisker plot. So I would, again, just kind of reminding you what we did here. And I think I showed you, if you weren't squared away on how to do that in Excel, the file that I have posted online goes through all of that. And if you're unable to produce those results in your own Excel data, please feel free to use the data that I have produced. What I'm really most interested in is your interpretation of that data anyhow. Then as I said, I inserted this line again to kind of show the break between this one variable analysis, and then we start getting into bivariate data. And let's see, the first thing that you did here is you looked at price. One thing that obviously, if you're picking one variable that drives the price of a home, the size, the number of square feet, obviously, and that's something that you would, pick up on in your quick study of the real estate market. So you're looking at a scatter plot, and I'm sure that I showed how to do that in my Excel file. And then what you want to do after you have taken a look at that scatter plot, you can obviously discuss a relation, and there's something that should be very easy to detect in there. And then we got into this business of 2-sample tests for hypotheses, or tests of hypotheses. And we had a nice discussion, I believe that was in week 6 or week 7, about what is an independent test of hypotheses. Obviously, we've got 2 sets of data here that are not related in the sense that you're not looking at a pre and post treatment, for example, of maybe one person to an X. What you're looking at here, once you got down into this 2-sample business, was the prices of the homes that had a pool and then the prices of the homes without a pool. And obviously you could tell that this was an independent test of hypothesis by the fact that you had data sets that had different numbers of observations. I showed you in my Excel file how to go about doing that. And as you looked at the test statistics and p-values, there are some conclusions that you should have drawn there. And I would say as you start your analysis on the two variable analysis, and you're giving your advice to the folks at the real estate or in the real estate business, I would certainly make time to highlight what you came up with here, and make sure that you obviously don't overstate these results. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to say, at the 0.05 significance level, what does that really mean in the context of the results that you are presenting here? But as I recall, one of these did not have a significant difference in price, but one of them did. So again, in that regard, how do you present that to the real estate folks, and what sort of advice do you give them? So I'll leave that there, and then finally this last piece here. We started getting into this idea of correlation. How do two variables correlate? And here you were looking at days and price correlation there, and then size and price and some correlation there. And then you would want to understand if the correlation value, the R value, was significant. And you can do that obviously by some p-value, or find the p-value, and then you can make that determination based on a 0.05 level of significance. Part B here, I'm not sure that there's really a whole lot here to say, other than the fact that what we wanted to do here was to teach you the technique of going through getting regression results, and then based on the regression equation, y hat equals b naught plus b1 x1 that you get from the regression results. What can you do with that data? Well, one of the things you can do is use that to predict. And what you were asked to do here is predict, based on the regression results, the price of a house that is 2,200 square feet. And then that was kind of an introduction of what the material or the book's calling a fitted value, which is a value that's predicted by a regression equation. And then when you take the difference between the actual price of a 2,200 square foot house and the fitted value, that gives you a value called a residual. And that's a big deal, especially when we got down here into the multiple regression, which is situations when you had more than one independent variable. I think, so there was a big word here that was used, and I should have highlighted that before I got in here. But as you started looking at how two variables, especially independent variables, how they vary, when they vary almost to the point where the correlation coefficient is pretty close to 1, there's this idea of multicollinearity, and I'll leave that there. But when you have that and you then start looking at regression results, you want to understand how the multicollinearity impacts the quality of your regression results, and then some of the things that you might see down in this D and E questions when you're starting to look at the distribution of residuals. And I think, as I showed in my histogram of the residuals at first blush really look pretty good. But then when we looked at this scatter plot of fitted values and residuals, there was something that I mentioned. There was a really nice random distribution of those effectively ordered pairs on the left-hand side of that plot. But then as you got, as the price of the houses increased, you were noticing a little more dispersion in the fitted values. And that kind of ties back into this idea of multicollinearity, and then it ties back into this correlation between independent variables. And it actually goes back to something that you saw in here when you start seeing outliers. And so it would be really nice to see some analysis of, when you get down into, when you start talking about this sort of information towards the end of the paper, it would be nice for you to understand and go back and circle back to, how did that start, or what is the impact of some of the results that you saw here, and then maybe some of the things that you saw in the correlation, then in the multiple regression results, and then as we started looking at this scatter plot of fitted residuals and fitted estimates, and then the residuals. So there's really no new Excel work this week, but I wanted to at least go through and talk about what some of the things that you may consider as you approach the paper, what the expectations are. Make sure you go through in the class resources area. There's those 3 files that again kind of lead into the case study itself. A couple resources maybe to set the table in the introduction of how the real estate market works. What are the things that really are key indicators of price?